Hello and welcome everyone to today's Fairygodboss live webinar. We're so excited to have you all join us, and we're going to give folks just a few seconds to connect before we commence. Now, while we're waiting, we'd love to know where you're all from, and I can see some comments already in the right-hand side, but please do shout out and let us know where you're joining from. I can see some drops already coming in here. Denver, well done. California, excellent. I myself am in London. Please do let us know where you are. So when we look at today, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'd like to introduce myself. First of all, I am Heidi King Underwood, and I'm Lead Talent Acquisition Partner for International here at Sonatype. Now, before we get started, I have a few quick announcements that I'd like to go through. This session will be recorded and shared via email with all of the registrants. So whether you're joining us today or be joining later, have to finish earlier, you will get a copy of this come through to you. And during the discussions, we'd love to hear from you. We hope you use that stage chat on the right-hand side of your screens to send messages, comments, and questions to the panelists and to one another. We'll be keeping an eye on that throughout today's webinar. And now I'm excited to kick off today's event, the Journey to Leadership, Stories to Success, sponsored by us here at Sonatype. Now, for all of us who do not know, Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Millions of women visit Fairygodboss for career connections, jobs, community, advice, hard to find intel about how companies are treating women, and virtual events such as this. Now, I'm thrilled to be joined by three of my colleagues here at Sonatype, and those are Santi, Savannah, and Sonika. Would you like to each take a minute to introduce yourselves? We'd love to hear what's going on with your life personally, professionally, what your role is with me here at Sonatype. Santi, shall we start with you?
Happy to, Heidi. First of all, greetings, everybody. Great to be here. And thank you, Heidi, for opening up the session. Really appreciate it. My name is Santi Mulakutla, and I'm a Director of Customer Success Engineering here at Sonatype. I have responsibility for the Customer Success Engineering group in the North America region. And I've been here for about 4.5 years, and it's been fantastic. And Heidi said something personal as well. All is going well, still having fun at what I'm doing, which is awesome. And love spending time with my two grown children. I am based in the East. I also split my time between the East Coast and West Coast. So that is me.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. And Savannah, maybe a little bit about yourself.
Hey everyone, like Santi and Heidi, very excited to be here with all of you today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Savannah Hydash. I'm Senior Manager of Strategy at Sonatype, and that involves a lot of different projects across the business. I see Santi laughing because she knows it's true. I'm joining from Colorado as well. I did see Denver in the chat. I'm actually in the mountains, so something personal about me. Lots of skiing, hiking, biking, outdoor activities. If you can think of it, I probably have done it at least once. So, but excited for today's discussion.
Thank you so much. And Sonika, a little bit about yourself, please.
Thank you, Heidi. Hi, everybody. I'm also, like all of the other ladies here, very, very excited to be here. I'm Sanika Sudhalkar. My pronouns are she, her. I am a senior engineering manager at Sonatype, and I lead engineering for two of our products, which is Sonatype Lifecycle and Sonatype Repository Firewall. I have been working with Sonatype for over 2 years now, and it has been an incredible journey so far. So very excited to be here representing Sonatype. On the person front, I live outside of Toronto in Canada with my husband, and I'm originally from India.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. Some great information there. Again, guys, on the right-hand side, please do feel free to share where you are joining from and throw in any questions as we go. We'll try and make sure that we answer some of those periodically throughout this webinar. So thank you again. I'm really excited about our discussion today. And for those just tuning in, we're going to be going through a few items today. Hopefully, you'll be interacting with us and you'll find some great takeaways from today. So when we look at the ecosystem today and how things have changed and evolved, I suppose the first question for us to be asking the panelists today is, how has your day-to-day work changed since you went into leadership here at Sonatype? So what about your overall approach to work has had to change, flex? What have you had to do to make sure that you're evolving as well? So Savannah, should we start with yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, it wasn't a title change or a role change specifically that really was a shift. For me, it was more so going from taking work assignments and doing it to the best of my ability to starting to seek out ways that I could make change and find those opportunities for myself and still do those to the best of my ability. And so that's kind of how it changed. And I think as a natural consequence of part of that, it became more collaborative, working more with others rather than just doing my work as I can by myself, but really being more inclusive, bringing others into the fold, learning from them, working with them to launch products and make it projects and make it a success. I think that in terms of actually day-to-day working changes, it's just a stylistic shift in terms of learning to adjust to different dynamics and being a little bit agile in that way.
I love that, throwing in the agile working. Amazing. And Sonika, what about yourself?
So for me, I personally, what brings me immense joy is to see people grow and thrive in their roles, and to an extent have an impact on their lives. And having that be a big part of my job, it means that I get to do what I love every single day of my work life. For me, I joined Sonatype as an engineering manager. So when I joined, that was kind of my journey. But I think the overall shift in my attitude, moving from an individual contributor to a people leader, I think it has been to learn to celebrate differences. We work in a multicultural environment. We have team members from different continents, speaking different languages. We have vastly different cultures. Understanding that, and the fact that there will be an impact and there will be a difference in how these people interact, how they work together, understanding and celebrating that, I think, is what I have learned and what has been a big shift in my approach to work.
Absolutely wonderful. I love that answer. Thank you so much. And what about for yourself, Santi?
So I love what Savannah and Sonika shared. And I would say my journey at Sonatype has been joining the company first as an individual contributor, and then, which was wonderful, working with client accounts. And that's been wonderful. And there was all the collaboration that Sonika mentions was evident in that role as well. Moving into then a manager role, which was a hybrid role. So it's part practitioner and then management as well. And so that was the duality of the two lenses, certainly was enriching, and that's lovely as well. And that sort of started the journey on what one of our core principles here at Sonatype, which is servant leadership. And that's really the approach we take to management. And by that, really what we're try to stay true to is the servant leadership is really all about the individuals doing the work and in support of them and celebrating them and their successes and being able to continue to do that so that we achieve our business targets, which we're all about. So that's the approach.
Absolutely. And I think that leads us on to that next question so beautifully, which is around adapting your leadership style, right? It's working effectively in that remote environment and supporting those remote teams. And it's about how do we lead from afar, right? So how have you adapted that leadership style to work effectively in the remote environment? And what tips would you give to those also leading remote teams, right? What can change and what can you do to have that real positive impact? Sonika, what about yourself?
So I think for me, prior to COVID and to things shifting remote, I had never a day in my life worked remotely. So all of my interactions were in person, and I thrive on that. On person interactions. Doing a one-on-one face-to-face allows you to understand the other person's body language, to understand the responses and reactions. it gets a lot more difficult when you're virtual. And I think for me, I do rely a lot on tools that we use at Sonatype. So for instance, having your video on, especially when you're doing one-on-one, is important. But I think what is the most important aspect of working remotely for me is to know your people. And it's especially difficult to do it in a remote setting. So, to understand their background, where they come from, aspects of their personal life, if they are willing to share those with you, it's even more important to do that in a remote setting because, if you're in person, you will organically have those conversations in a coffee chat or at lunch, but you have to make those opportunities when you're in a remote setting. And I think the other aspect that I think is very important is to make sure all of your team members have an avenue to communicate. They, some of them might be more vocal than others. Some of them might prefer written communication, having that understanding and giving them the platform to communicate however it is that they're comfortable doing, and to make sure everybody's voices are heard. I think that is the other thing to keep in mind if you're leading teams remotely.
Absolutely. And I really resonate with what you're saying there. I think especially in this remote world, you touched on that kind of diverse background, right? The cultural background, but it's all that mindfulness around other elements of diversity, like neurodiversity. Some people struggle to have cameras on. So like you said, some people prefer written word over verbal. And it's giving that opportunity for the more vocal people to have an understanding, to take that step back in those group environments. So the less vocal, the more introverted can come forward and have that equal opportunity to shine. Love what you said there. Thank you so much for sharing. Savannah, what about yourself?
So my career journey has been a little bit different from Sonica. Actually, most of it has been remote, which is a crazy thing to say. But I think for me, in terms of a remote environment, one of the challenges is it just becomes stale. The monotony between work and life, they blend together, they bleed into one another. And that's just what it is. We don't have those organic interactions anymore. And so what I've found to be really helpful is to just be open to experimentation and trying different things, whether it's different communication styles, running a meeting in a different way. Maybe you test out a design thinking workshop, or you just try and do some video updates, async, just playing around with things, seeing what works, what resonates with people. And it's not going to be the same thing for every person on the team, but learning to be to just try different things and being okay if it doesn't work, acknowledging that, and then trying something different until you find something that's engaging for folks, because it's important to have that level of engagement. And then, as Sonica said, not forgetting the human element. It's so easy just to log off, and we don't have those water cooler moments, as they say, to interact and learn from one another. So creating opportunities to share the personal is insofar as people are familiar or comfortable with that, in as much as they're willing to share, just creating space for that in the team, whether it's having a fun question at the beginning of a meeting or sharing updates in Slack, like, hey, here's something that I did this weekend that I'm proud of. I think all of those little things contribute to creating a more engaging environment where people are excited of being part of a remote team, because it has a lot of benefits and flexibility, but it also has its challenges too.
Absolutely. I love that. And I really resonate with what you said there about, opening with something specific. I hosted our new employee onboarding this week. And, at the end of every session, just to kind of pick the mood back up and try and, take it from that kind of flat. And when you get towards the end, it was telling a fun fact, and the laughter, just ending a meeting with a bit of a laughter, a bit of a smile can really, I think, change the momentum and the mentality around meetings right remotely. So leading that on nicely, how do you make sure those direct reports feel well supported in lives both in and out of the office, right? Because what is it? It's the 8-8-8 rule, right? 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours in work, 8 hours for home life. What do you think about making sure everyone does feel well supported? And Santi, should we flip to you this time?
Absolutely. Love the question, and love, Heidi, you're talking about neurodiversity and encompassing that and accounting for that. So agree with that. It's really easy in a remote organization, especially if you're in an individual contributor role, to become an island. And we were so conscious of that when as a company, when we see our teammates and colleagues, we account for that. So checking in regularly is very, very important. And as Sonika mentioned, the mechanisms and the touch points are critically important. And I think a large part of that is, you talk about people who may not be comfortable putting the camera on. We highly encourage it here, as you all know, at Sonatype. We're always on video, and it doesn't matter. We're used to sounds in the background. We're used to whatever, and it's really creating that safe space. And it starts with that, is creating a safe space for anyone to be whoever they are and comfortable, because what we care about is the work and the output. So really touching with them, getting to know them as individuals. Individual is not just the performance or the output, because to be able to get that and benefit from the wonderful work that they produce is understanding them as a human being first. And that's the human element that Savannah and Sonika were talking about. That's critically important. And so we factor that into the way we work together as a collaborative model, and how we manage and support each other throughout. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. And I love what you mentioned there. I think, for myself with my managers directly within Sonatype, we all have resonance within our lives, right? In the background noise, for anyone joining, I've got 2 dogs. They're not always quiet. I'd love to say that they are. Sometimes they're jumping up just to say hello. They love to steal the limelight on our Zoom calls. But, I've got that in common with some of my teammates. And, you can drop it into a Slack channel, how's Rupert and Winnie? And then other things are mutual exercises that you do, right? I know that one of my managers, she's got to do her walking challenge each week. It's, just that kind of commonality where you can resonate on a one-to-one as well as in a group level, bring into those meetings. Oh, how was your weekend? Did you do your kids' party, or did you manage to make it to spin class? I think that really makes sense. Absolutely. 100%. And Sonika, what about for yourself?
I think, a lot of what Santi said resonated with me as well. It's very, very important to understand and to know them in order to support them well enough. And I think that's, what I said in the previous question as well. It's, knowing your team members, I think, is absolutely critical to being able to make a positive impact in their lives. And I think the notion of, work life and personal life can be kept separate from each other is not realistic at all. Like, if we expect people to bring their authentic selves to work, that is going to be, whatever it is that they're going through in their personal lives. And understanding that and, giving them sort of that freedom and, trusting in them is very important. So 2 main aspects, I think, for me are gaining your team's trust. I think, it could be a simple thing like telling them, hey, you can take a couple of hours in a day if you want to go run an errand, and I'm not going to look at your Slack and be like, oh, this person's away for this time. Like, that's a little thing. It's, it doesn't, it should be what everybody does, but I think even that little thing goes a long way in, helping them understand that, well, my manager trusts me and my team trusts me. So, I will be responsible for my work, but I can also make time for my personal life. I think the other thing is what we learned in the last couple of years, especially, is showing empathy towards your team members goes a long, long way. We had team members, if they're working in a location that has national crisis going on, it is unrealistic to expect that would not have any impact on their work. And just to have a conversation about that and let them know that we have their backs. They can take some time. They can take whatever it is that they need to deal with their personal issues, but then we'll be here to support them whenever they're ready to work. I think that definitely goes a long way. Something I am incredibly lucky in my teams, I think the entire team believes in all of these things. So we have retrospectives and regular check-ins, but in the retrospectives, different team members will find these little icebreaker questions that they will share with their, that they will come up with and conduct and share with their team members. And that it's a wonderful way of checking in on people and making sure their mental and physical healths are okay, and that they're getting all of the support that they need from the team. So I feel like if you as a manager set those examples, people will take them forward, and it will be that goes a long way in making your team members feel supported. So, bit of a long answer, but yeah.
Absolutely. No, I love that answer. And something that I go back to when you were saying, you talk about the joy within your team. That's a massive part of building trust. I know that when I finish my day and my manager said to me, you know what, that was great. And I've shared it with the wider audience and there's great feedback and I'm really proud of what you're achieving. It just elevates you, right? And it elevates your relationship as well. It's not just a short-term high. It's I'm doing well. I'm on the right path. And you know what, I can share a little bit more because you have faith in the authentic me. You're building that relationship, and sometimes it comes quick, sometimes it takes a bit longer, but it's understanding those relationships. I think one thing that I did when I joined Sonatype, and I think it was a massive help, I shared a user manual when I joined, and it was a user manual for me, and it said, how do I like to work? What are things that you may find are maybe they're not what you're used to. And it's like, for me personally, I like to go down the rabbit hole, which means that I can seem a bit of a lone wolf, but actually pull me back into the fold and I'm there. It's those kind of awarenesses and feeling, okay, yes, I can share that information, that helps to really build that. So I'm always a huge recommendation on the user manual. Whenever you're even within a business, you can do it at any point, have your team do it, or joining a new business. Here's a bit about me, a bit about the professional, how I like to work, how to communicate with me, and then a little bit about, behind the scenes, right? I think it can go a long way. Okay, so let's move on a little bit of a harder topic for us. We're going to move on to imposter syndrome. After all, it's something that's massive for us as a leader. It's massive within our community. It's managing that syndrome that comes with it. So it's, what advice would you give to others who may be struggling with imposter syndrome? We know this comes in many different forms, so feel free to expand upon it however you see fit. But what advice would you give to others who may be struggling with imposter syndrome? Santi, if we go to you first, please.
Absolutely. Great topic. And I'll start with a quick story. So when the phraseology of imposter syndrome came up a few years ago, my daughter actually brought it up to me, and she said, so Mom, what do you think about imposter syndrome? And have you ever felt that? And honestly, I said, I had to look it up because I was not aware. And when I looked it up and I saw the definition, I have to be honest, I wasn't comfortable with the definition that I read, because it talks about feeling like being a fraud at the surface level, and we'll go deeper. And that was never something that I could ever resonate with, quite honestly. I'm going to be honest, I've never felt like a fraud a day in my life, because I am whatever I am, and that's what I hang on to. And I would say that approach also helps me understand really what I think is at the root of imposter syndrome, which is doubt. And we've all felt that as human beings, and absolutely understand that and resonate with that piece of it. So I don't feel like a fraud, but I understand the notion of having doubt and self-doubt and questioning that. And I think the way that, because of my journey, what I found has worked for me that I would offer as consideration for others would be to fall back on what we know, the work we have done. I know that has helped me through the course of my career, and not that it was linear by any stretch. But the point is that in the end, I know what I know, and I'm willing to do the homework and the work to understand what I know. And certainly what I don't know, the awareness of that, and then if it's relevant to what my path, putting the work in to learn that as well. And that's the best I can do ever. And to me, that's what gives me the confidence to say, I'm not a fraud. This is what I know. And this is what I don't. And here's how I can get there. And is what I fall back on time and again, honestly, Heidi. So I remove the word fraud from my vernacular. It's not there. I never go there. And I always just go back on the work piece.
I absolutely love that. I actually saw something, I'm going to bring in social media now, on Instagram, which was celebrate the small stuff, not just the big stuff.
100%.
And it's actually a mindfulness approach, which is, rather than concentrating on the negative, instead, if you're always focusing on the positive and you're celebrating the small successes, all of a sudden your routine turns from 100%. Feeling more of the negative, but actually by celebrating every win. you know, just getting up, making the bed, getting yourself into gear, you know, just getting yourself in and giving 100% one day is still something to go, you know what, I didn't think I could do that at the beginning, but you did it. So it shows what you can achieve. Absolutely love that. Savannah, what about for yourself?
I think this is probably my favorite question of the discussion today. I really resonate with Santi's definition. I don't view it as fraudulent. It's more the source of doubt or insecurity or just lack of confidence. And I think for me, what's been really helpful in the past in my journey has been to understand what's driving that. Like when I feel myself feeling imposter syndrome, to stop and ask myself, what is the root of this? Is it because I feel like I'm not old enough? Is it because I feel like I don't have enough knowledge in the specific area of discussion? Once I've recognized that, then I have the ability to rewrite the narrative to something that will kind of flip the script on the imposter syndrome. So whether that is taking something and, you know, just flipping the way I think about myself and where I am in my career, that's one approach. Or as Santi mentioned, diving into a topic area to learn as much as I can, as quickly as I can, so that I can at least have the basic knowledge to be engaging in a discussion. So I think really what it comes down to for me, and what I would offer for others, is just identify what's driving that, and then think about what is doable within my own power that I can influence, rather than being, for lack of a better word, a victim of this, or this is happening to me. How can I take ownership of it and drive it into something that I am confident in, and that I am excited for, and that I'm ready to contribute to the world on.
I absolutely love that. And thank you so much on talking about the root of it. I resonate massively with that. I can remember I've had very poor management previously who have been very quick to say, that's wrong, fix it, but not identify where the error came from. And as you're learning, and you know, you can go and deep dive, and sometimes you've got to learn on the job, right? And, and you're trying your hardest. And sometimes in previous experiences in the working environment, it's been a case of, no, that's wrong, but without the help to drive you forward to learn and to adapt. So of course, when you start to try something new again, or you're trying to achieve and you're trying to lead, it can be, oh, am I doing this right? You know, that doubt creeps in, right? And it's finding that root of, well, where does that fear come from? And absolutely, it's that lack of confidence. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so guys, just to remind you, please do ask our panelists any questions in the right-hand side, should you wish to. Anybody that's joined as we've been going along, please share your location. We do love to know where you are joining us from. Now, moving on slightly around developing leadership skills. I think, as Savannah was saying there, right, you go and you take a deep dive into research, learning in subject areas. But when you come to your leadership skills, you know, what resources can you recommend for others who want to do the same? So it could be obviously a manager, it could be external resources, however you have learned or developed over the years, over recent months, whatever that may look like for yourself. How do you continue to develop? Sonika, what about yourself?
That's a great question. I have been thinking about this a lot recently. There are a lot of resources out there that you can use to develop your unique leadership style. For me personally, though, the way I learn and what influences my leadership style a lot is my own leaders. Learning from people who I've had the privilege of working with. If something resonates with me, if I feel like, oh, in this instance, I felt supported, so I'm going to use that now. That is how I personally feel like, my leadership style develops and I continue to learn. And it doesn't have to be leaders. It could be really anybody you interact with. Everybody brings something to the table. And I feel like those actual, real life interactions and real life examples for me personally go a lot longer than, looking to books or resources. And I think the other thing for me, that I've learned over the years, is leadership is not one size fits all, right? your tenets can stay the same, the basic tenets can stay the same, but how you apply them to your team members can vastly differ between, like, from person to person. Like Santi said earlier, we at Sonatype are huge believers in servant leadership, and I have some really, really great examples of leaders that I've worked with who are extraordinary servant leaders. So for me as well, like, my basic is I am because you are, and my purpose here is to help you succeed. How that actually ends up happening, how that actually translates, is different with different team members. Some team members would prefer to make decisions in their areas of expertise, and they don't want me or my opinion in there. And so for those people, I'll just be there on the sidelines. If they need help, I'm there to help. For some other people, they might want to bounce ideas off of me, and I'm there for that as well. So something to remember is, they're both very different needs, and neither of them are wrong. So understanding that, I think, is essential to being a great leader.
Amazing. And Santi, what about yourself?
Yeah, I love the way Sonika responded to that, and I completely agree. I think, yes, there are resources around, and I think that it's a combination of whether it's through reading, which I tend to do at times through various forms, books, articles, journals, listening to podcasts, things like that, that to inform. You get little nuggets here and there, and then you inform. And certainly all of that is there. I love Sonika's reference to leaders who inform. And because I'm a little bit on the older end of the spectrum, I can say that yes, and to that would be certainly looking at leaders who helped inform your way of thinking and developing an individual leadership style. And I would say formulating your individual leadership style, which I've done over the course of the years, because it really comes down to authenticity of you as the individual and what is a natural extension of your being. And this is where the alignment or resonance with values becomes so critically important, because then that's how you say, okay, within this context or this fabric of a culture or value system, I can operate in this way to the optimal or to the max. And that's where you then bring your leadership style. And that's what I've certainly learned to do as well, and am committed to it. I've come to a point where I know what I want, what I can bring, and what I am, and how I want to lead. And I think that becomes a journey for all of us based on the various stages where we're at in our respective journeys.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you. And I think you're totally right there around different styles, right? I'm very much a visual learner. So for me, I love doing LinkedIn learning courses. And we're obviously very, very fortunate here at Sonatype. We have access. And I think if anyone goes onto my LinkedIn profile, if you scroll to the bottom, you'll see the ones that I've partaken in, which is around D&I and how to be an effective leader and how to communicate during these remote times. But I think as well, it's around, again, to touch on neurodiversity. It's also extremely hard to identify which routes are right for you, especially when you look at a, like you said, a generational thing, right? I'm approaching 40. I'm kind of in that middle piece. My education was very much classroom built, started in the office. And then when you do have a neurodiverse background, you can struggle with identifying the right way to go about sourcing the learning materials, because you think, well, as a kid, this is how I learned. Then I was office-based, so it was very much one-to-one with a manager. And now as we move forward, it's actually what format is right for me. And I think, it's going away and thinking, right, am I actually learning here? Is this absorbing? Is this resonating? And then again, rethinking and rejigging and not being afraid to go, actually, this isn't a method that's working for me. And likewise, where you've had great leaders you can learn from and you can resonate with that helps you to adapt your style. Some people might not have had that previously in their old role of having somebody to look up to and go, that's the type of leader I want to be. So again, it's, absorb as much information out there in the market, see what other people are doing, join groups based on your type of background. If you do come from a D&I type of background where you slot into a certain community, seek them out. How did you learn? How did you go about finding that leadership? And a question actually that's popped up from Saba is, do you think team coaching is possible in virtual spaces, especially when a team is partially virtual and partially in person? And Santi, if we go back to yourself there.
Love that question. It's a fantastic one. So I love it because the short answer is yes, I believe it's possible, and we do it here. And I love it because it is challenging. In other words, you have to recognize the challenges that go with it. You have a portion of your team that's co-located or within a region and then not. How do we achieve that balance? Here at Sonatype, we have in the customer success engineering team, for example, we have people who are in our organization co-located within the UK region area as a broader global organization, and we have others who are distributed across the region. And we still work hard to be a cohesive organization. And the way we do that is we say, okay, the regular check-ins on team check-ins, sharing, sessions where we're actually sharing what's happening. When colleagues of ours are able to get together through a co-located situation, we talk about it and we share that, and we through envy, and we live vicariously through them for those of us who cannot. And we're quite open about that. At the same time, we applaud and celebrate the fact that our colleagues who are able to be co-located, that's a lovely aspect. When you're in a remote organization, for the majority, one thing you do miss is the water cooler feeling of being going by someone's office or just, you know, talking things through right then and there. And then what we do is we say, let's have a quick Zoom session so that we can replicate that as much as possible. So there are techniques that we do. It does mean that taking time and being aware of that dynamic so that we don't have siloed groups that are formed and cohesion ends up breaking down. So that's the awareness that we have up front to be able to manage through that. I hope I'm answering that question.
Absolutely. I think you did. Absolutely. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add?
I think to add to what Santi said, and you know, we are completely remote and we don't have people, like we have people who are in the same location, but we don't really come into work. So our like majority of our interactions are through Zoom. What I personally love is those whiteboard tools that you have. You can do them on your own time. You can put, you know, whatever it is, you know, all sorts of communication on there, and for me, it makes me feel like I'm collaborating with somebody. Like it's as close to being in person as possible. So I think, you know, with those tools and with a mindset change that this is, you know, this is not an impediment. This could work if we all, you know, put our minds to it. I think definitely it is possible.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm actually going to take another question which has come in from Lizette, which is how or when do you know when you were ready to take on a leadership role? Because I think this pairs really nicely into where we're actually about to go with this conversation. So how or when did you know you were ready to take on a leadership role? And Sonika, if we could stay with yourself, that would be amazing.
Sure. That's a great question. I was actually thinking, like, what was there a point in time? I think for me, I always knew this is where I wanted to be. You know, like I've said before, I am a person that thrives on, you know, having, you know, communicating with people, interpersonal relationships, how that impacts their work life. I love seeing people grow. I love seeing people be their best. And if I have even a small part to play in that, I think that's what, you know, makes my day. So that being a part of my personality, I think for me, I knew all along that this is where I wanted to get. So all of my steps that I took in my career were towards being in this position right now. So I don't know if that answers your question, Lizette, but you know, that's how I knew.
I can chime in here too. I think, like you said, or like you, this is something that I've been driving towards, and I've always knew that I wanted to, and I aspired to. And I would almost say I didn't know I was ready. And it's something where that's where the imposter syndrome can come in. The doubt, not thinking that you have enough experience, or I don't have the expertise, or there's all of these amazing people in leadership roles. How can I be that? And it's almost just putting yourself in that opportunity and then proving it to yourself that, no, you can step into this and succeed. So I hate to give you a not answer, Lizette, but I do think that it's something where it may never feel like it's ready, and it's just having faith. And in the foundation that you've built and just jumping into it and trusting yourself.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on that as well. I love that, Savannah. I love that you played that counter because that's so true. And oftentimes it's also, if you feel you're ready, believing that you are, and maybe you don't find that opportunity to model that. And I know some of us look for that and say, well, I'm not really getting that opportunity. And I think all of those are valid. And I think you get to say the readiness of yourself, you get to assess and then say, okay, what's the path there? And if a path isn't emerging, go seek that path. I think these are all valid journeys to take. And the control, Savannah, you picked on this earlier, the control that you have and recognizing that, I think, becomes paramount to realizing your objectives and your desires. Heidi, back to you.
Thank you so much. And to be vulnerable, I've been a manager. I had to take the step back. I think, identify exactly the right environment for you to take that step forward. I've previously been a manager. I know that my team enjoyed me being their manager, but emotionally, the bandwidth that it can take from you if you aren't in the right environment can be detrimental to yourself. So don't be afraid to look at, if you do take the step, making sure it's the right path that you're on as well. Make sure that you're doing the best for other people. I think that's really, really important. Making sure, first of all, is this the right environment? Yes, I can do the job. Yes, I'm ready for this. I've got the confidence to take that step. Do you have the ecosystem to continuously support you on that management journey? And if it's not, like Santi just said, go and seek that out, because you could be ready, but you have to do it in the right environment. Otherwise you can end up just giving a bit too much. But moving on to that next question, which is the most valuable career mistake, which, let's be vulnerable, let's put it out there. What's been that most valuable career mistake? How did you overcome it? Or share that time where you had to make that really difficult decision that challenged your values as that leader, your approach to it, maybe that story of the open, middle and close. What was the scenario? How did you affect it? And what came out of it at the end? How did that affect you? Savannah, do you want to kick this one off?
Sure. I think part of just being a leader and being my best self is learning from the micro mistakes along the way. I do want to acknowledge that certainly not everything is preventable, but acknowledging what's not working in the moment and applying quick fixes to that, I think, is hugely important and valuable, and that there are those little tiny steps along the way, and maybe we don't recognize them in a call like this or in a discussion like this because they're not that big thing, but they are important to acknowledge. In terms of an actual legitimate mistake, I think Santi and Sonika will probably remember well the town hall where I did not properly manage the preparation for that town hall, and we had a lot of tech issues. Like, everyone joined under the president's name of the company, and we had the screen share wasn't working, and we had the videos weren't working. And there was a takeaway around preparation for me, but I think the bigger takeaway and why I would consider this to be the most valuable is I actually learned a lot about myself through it, because I had to think on my feet and improvise and speak on a town hall to 400 people without having any materials. And I always thought that that's something that I could never do, that I wasn't dynamic like that I wouldn't be able to just go off the cuff. And I actually learned about myself that I do have a little bit more of that flexibility and ability to go on the fly. Now, I definitely still am going to be over preparing, but it was a good learning for myself, and it gave me a little bit of a boost of confidence for those types of scenarios in the future, knowing that I have that back pocket ability.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. And Santi, yourself.
I love what Savannah said. And just for the record, she's fantastic at what she does. And that was a beautiful mistake because we all had fun with it as well. And she's a great sport to boot. So that was really wonderful. I would So I tend to, Savannah referenced narrative early on in one of her previous responses. So for me, it is about my own narrative and framing it for me. And Heidi, you talked about positive thinking, and that's very much at the core of who I am. So I don't look at things as mistakes. I look at them as realizations, and the realizations for me on my journey. And I've had to experience whatever I've had to experience to grow, as Savannah has shared, and learn from. And everything that I've experienced, I will own, embrace, whether it was for good or for bad outcomes. They're mine, and they brought me to where I am today. So it is my journey, and I will own all of it. And so with the realizations that I've had along the way, there are times when I know in previous lives and companies that I've been in, I stand firm on, and I voice my thinking on what my beliefs are. And again, values are very important to me. And I learned along the way that I was not willing to compromise on those. And I was vocal about those. And when I say those things, sometimes when you mentioned, Heidi, the ecosystem needs to be there for the opportunity to really thrive. That's so on point, because in those situations where there's a conflict or not a misalignment with your beliefs and values with the ecosystem, the opportunity cannot survive. You know what I mean? It cannot thrive. I've experienced those types of situations where then that forced me or prompted me to say, I need to seek my path elsewhere. And that's literally what ended up happening. And so those are, do I look back and say those are mistakes? I honestly can't, because I'm here today working with lovely colleagues and doing things. So those are realizations you have along the way to know myself. As Savannah said, you know yourself better. And I think it hardens what you're willing to give up and maybe what you're willing to not give up. And I think that's empowering.
Absolutely amazing. And actually, we've had a question come up from Chelsea, and I think that really just drives right into what you just said, which is, what's the best way to respond to negative feminine feedback, such as a woman might be seen as aggressive, but a male might be called assertive? So Santi, do you want to carry on with that theme?
I'd love it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's to stay firm, call it out as we can. In the following way is what I would suggest is, first of all, understand that it's happening. Do we see the difference is one thing, shining a light on it, if you will, and to say that there's an association here, and why is this adjective or this description used in this situation versus in another situation it's not used? What is the difference? And I really think, for me, operating from a platform of seeking to understand first gets me to a better outcome that is usually aligned outcome. And people are able to operate and say, oh, yeah, this is, oh, you know what, I didn't think of it that way, or yes, I am. And it allows for room for everyone to put the better version of themselves forward. Let me say it that way, because that becomes important when confronting those types of situations. The reason I say that is, if I have found, at least if I don't take that approach, the alternative ends up being far more contentious than I want it to be. And it reduces or falls short of the outcome that I myself am seeking. And so therefore, if I shift my thinking and operate from a place of seeking to understand and then say, why is this happening? It tends to go into a much better, more productive, constructive space. Sonika, Savannah, open to your thoughts.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's really about creating a positive environment for a constructive conversation. And the way to do that won't be the same for every person. How you address it or acknowledge it might be best done in a one-to-one outside or via Slack or whatever it might be. But just being mindful of the best way to create that constructive space, I think will totally change the dynamic of the conversation and create a powerful moment for both participants.
Yeah, absolutely agree with what Santi and Savannah said. But it is important to address it, no matter how you do it. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've definitely learned over the years to add some fluff to my Slack messages. As a female, everyone expects you to come in on a Monday morning and be like, hi, how are you? How was your weekend? By the way, did you get a chance to look at this last week? And instead, my old messages used to be, hey, has this been done? And, you get that feedback, right? Which is, you could be a little bit gentler, and you think to yourself, yeah, I actually probably could. But I think also it's a cultural thing as well. I've just checked where you're from, Chelsea, and I can see you wrote Phoenix, but I think as well, you know, it's a cultural thing, isn't it, as well? You know, if you have maybe a colleague from say Singapore to myself here in the UK, there's a lot more, it's a different format of greetings. Cultural awareness is a massive thing as well. You know, what I may be seeing myself as, to resonate exactly what you said, I might be seeing myself as being very efficient, you know, trying to make sure that we're managing the scenario that's at hand or the conversation. And another person might be thinking, well, hold on a second, you're being really disrespectful here. So it's balancing that as well, but also looking at it from the other perspective as well. You know, are you calling me out for something that actually isn't happening? Is that a cultural thing? I saw, again, to bring back social media, something which said, I will no longer apologize at the end of my emails. And I think it's a really big thing, right? Rather than saying, you know, I'm so sorry I'm late with that, thank you for flagging. You know, rather than saying the negative to reinforce that you are at fault as well, it's just promoting, you know, the assertive words that say, okay, I hear you, I'm listening, I'm adapting, but we're not going to be apologizing for a scenario that's come from nowhere. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so we're getting close to the line round. We've got 9 minutes left. So what we'll do is we'll go to 1 or 2 last questions, depending on where we can go to. But I think this one's a great one towards the end. What do you think are some of the most important qualities for a successful leader? And how have you yourself developed these qualities over time? And Sonika, if we go to you first.
That is a great question. Something that I think about very often. I think for me, if there's one most important quality that I think a leader must have is honesty. And it extends to a lot of scenarios, right? So for example, you know, honesty could be in the sense that I will always communicate honestly to my team members. If I know something and I can share it, I will share it with them. You know, that is very important, but the other aspect is honesty in terms of the feedback you provide. And you know, for me, that is something that did not come naturally to me. I am a bit of a people pleaser, so I like, if there's a situation where I have to give somebody constructive feedback and it's like, hey, you need to improve on this or that, it's, you know, I get super flustered while I do that. So over the years, with a lot of practice, with a lot of mindful practice, I think now I'm at a place where I can, you know, I have to prepare when I'm going into these conversations, but I can do it. But I think, you know, that is the most important quality for me. And I think the way I have developed that is just, you know, practicing. As sometimes I find making notes helps. Like if you have a difficult conversation to have, just make notes of the important points, because otherwise I'm going to try and, you know, go around the subject rather than get straight to it. So that definitely helps me. The other important qualities, I think, for me, and I've said this in my previous answers as well, is having empathy. I cannot emphasize how important it is, and respecting and understanding your audience. I think knowing who you're talking to, how you talk to them, and this again comes with experience. You know, you won't know how to do it the first time you talk to somebody, but just take cues from their reactions, take cues from how they respond to whatever conversation you're having. But you know, it's very, very important to respect those people, like the individuals, and to understand who they are and what they will respond to. So,
absolutely,
yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I think that goes back to that user manual I mentioned earlier. My boss knows to give me immediate feedback and never put a diary event in my diary that says quick chat without an agenda. Give me an agenda, otherwise the anxiety is going to here. Be a good boss, be considerate. And then Savannah, yourself.
I think I'll try and keep it brief because I know we're coming up on time here. I think there are all of the qualities that when you read about it I 100% agree with. Being visionary, being resilient and able to problem solve, being communicative. But the two that I'll touch on that I think are one is perhaps a little bit different, and then the other one is kind of a buzz right now, starting with that authenticity. I think you mentioned this earlier, Heidi, being okay with being vulnerable. And that's a huge step. And Santi also mentioned earlier, knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know, and knowing where you need to lean on others and where you can bring that knowledge and expertise to the group. I think those are all elements of authenticity that really help to build credibility and help to grow the community within the team, is by normalizing those moments of vulnerability. The other quality that I'll speak to is inclusivity. And this is perhaps not the most typical one, but I found it to be a very helpful approach because, and what I mean by inclusivity is seeking new perspectives, being open to new ideas, actively listening and empowering others. And I think that's all wrapped up in what Sonika was speaking to as well. But really just getting a chance to know people, understand their opinions and perspectives, and considering it and incorporating that into the visionary elements and how the team comes to work every day. I think that that's a really important piece of creating an environment where people feel welcome and ready to bring their best authentic selves to work every day.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, so I guess we're down to the last question. Fairygodboss has a tradition of asking its panelists the following. Now, this goes across, so we've had lots of answers in different webinars. What have you observed that women do not feel comfortable enough bragging? So taking ownership for the amazing things that they achieve. So share with us an accomplishment, personal or professional, that you are most proud of. Please feel free to brag. I think that's what we are going to be looking for here. Santi, do you want to start?
I will. I love the question, and it is let's brag and let's take it on. I will also say that it's speaking about taking pride and taking stock, in what we've done. We have a lot to acknowledge. For me, in my professional career, I am most proud of my work. Wherever I've been, wherever I've gone, I know that I feel good that I've added value. And to be able to say that is powerful for me, and being able to, as I've grown in my career, just to continue to quantify that value in different ways is always helpful. And I value that. And here at Sonatype, one of the things that I love that I've been able to do was a few years ago, we started Better Together teams. And it's a small thing, but we amplify it now over and over. And that is that we get a small team of people together to solve a problem that only a few of us are experiencing, but we know that others will experience at a later in time. So to move an organization, do you get the whole organization there, or you just say, no, I'm going to take this and address it now and keep the assets and collateral there to be referenced by others so that they can go forward? And that's the approach we took, and we use it now over and over as a lever. So I love that we do that, and I'm really happy to see that flourishing. On a personal level, I'm most proud of my children. My son is graduating this week, and that means 2 children are out of the grown adults and living their lives, and I couldn't be more proud. That's me.
I love that. You get to eat whenever you want. I'm proud that they've flown away. What about yourself?
So for me, I think the one that comes to mind is I had to take a almost 4-year career break right in at the peak of my career, and back then my confidence was down the dumps, and from there I went on to get my master's degree and then joined the workforce back again after that gap. And I think now when I look back, I'm like, that was a big achievement. I didn't think of it at the time as that, but it was an extremely difficult thing for me to do, but I'm here now. And I think at Sonatype, I was responsible. I was instrumental in making a lot of changes to our hiring process to make it more inclusive, to make it less daunting for candidates. And so I will definitely say that that's one I'm very proud of.
Thank you so much, that perseverance. And Savannah, yourself?
I think for me, everything that Sonika and Santi said on the personal side and getting to where you are, that's really what stands out to me. I'm just really proud of how far I've come. But in terms of a specific event or program, I would say I'm so amazed with how the core values program has developed at Sonatype. That's something that I actually identified the need for and ran focus groups with to develop the core values, and then have developed a number of supporting programs to help to make it be something that is more than just a poster or words and actually be part of the culture at Sonatype. So that just gives me so much joy to see that being adopted within the company.
And I know that Sonatype's grateful for all of your contributions. So thank you so much for sharing those. So thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you, Santi, Savannah and Sanika today for sharing such great advice, insight and stories as well. And as a reminder, we'll be sending out the recording of today's event along with resources to learn more about opportunities here at Sonatype. In the meantime, be sure to check out Sonatype's profile and our jobs on Fairygodboss. And we'd love to hear your feedback to help us improve future events. So please head over to the Typeform tab. It's on the right hand side of the screen to share any thoughts you might have in a 1-minute survey. And thank you very much for turning up, showing up and being a part of this. We'll see you next time.
Heidi, thank you for a fantastic job facilitating this discussion. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heidi, and thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.